Good evening and welcome to ASU Cares Gather. The theme tonight is Calling It Home. I am so excited for tonight's show, but first, I'd like to tell you about some of the exciting things we have going on at CARE. Every Thursday at 7, we have Beams, and once a month, we have your favorite storytelling series, Gather. Be sure to check out tomorrow's Beam show at 7, and next month's Gather, August 19th at 6:30 p.m. Right now, I give you our host, Nina Simone Moore. Take it away, Simone.
Good evening and welcome to ASU Cares Gather, a storytelling series where we believe everyone is a storyteller. We seek to create a platform that facilitates the expansion and crafting of narratives that connect and inspire. My name is Nina Simone Moore. Yes, that is my real name. I'm casting in from Brooklyn, New York, and identify as a storyteller. I enjoy bringing stories to life in multiple mediums. I'm a writer, performer, and work in film and television production. I had the pleasure of being a part of Gather 3 last month, and I'm so happy to be back to host tonight. You can catch me on Facebook by searching Nina Simone Moore, and on Instagram at Crazy for This Life. You are in for a treat tonight. We have a beautiful lineup. The theme for tonight is Calling It Home. Be sure to show your love to the artist in the comment section with smiley face, a thumbs up, hearts, snaps, and claps. When I watched the playback of my performance last month, I was touched by all of the comments. So be sure to give your positive feedback after each piece. Tonight, we'll be featuring 3 storytellers, followed by a 10 to 15-minute Q&A with the artist. We want to hear your questions, so be sure to submit them in the chat. Our first storyteller, Kenja Hassan, serves as ASU's Cultural Relations Director. Hassan serves as a liaison between ASU and diverse communities throughout the Valley. During her time at ASU, Kenja has brought college prep programs to American Indian youth on reservations, launched a series of reports on the status of Arizona's ethnic and racial minorities, and orchestrated national dialogues on pressing issues in Washington, D.C. and other cities. Kenja holds a BA in religion from Princeton University and an MA in religious studies from Arizona State University, both with a focus on American Indian traditions. She is currently pursuing a PhD at ASU's College of Nursing and Health Innovation, focusing on health disparities in the African American community. I give you Kenja Hassan.
Thank you, Simone. The title of my story is Who Deserves to Own a House and Call It Home? So 10 years into co-owning a house with my partner, I still love that I get to call this house my home. It's a lovely 1925 bungalow that had been completely refurbished. But I got those moments when I second guess home ownership. You know those days when it's 117 outside and you don't know if the air conditioner can keep up, when the woodpecker puts a hole right over the front door. Some days I swear I can hear the termites. Oh gosh, and the yard. Yes, there are definitely things about being a homeowner that make me go, I just don't feel like dealing with it. But in those moments, I do a gratitude check. I literally ask myself, what can I be grateful for about the situation in this moment? Some days I am so excited about my Dyson vacuum cleaner because my great-grandmother, she only had a broom. And it was her full-time job to clean houses for white families because that's really all the employment that was available to Black women in her town at her time. And the yard, okay, that godforsaken yard, it really is my oasis. But the grass, the oleanders, sometimes I just feel grateful that I don't have to cut wood and cook over an open fire after working all day out in the sun like my ancestors did without pay. So my joy at owning this space is the same as those early American men who no longer wanted to be serfs on some European lord's land and declared their independence from England. Now, I might be a different color and a different gender, but the dream is the same. Don't I deserve a great place to call home? Did I mention location? As realtors say, location, location, location. This house is in a great spot with access to highways, groceries, entertainment, employment. I know it is a privilege for me to call this spot home because prior to the 1960s Fair Housing Act, Black people in Phoenix were not allowed to live north of Van Buren. Now, sure, I guess my partner, who is a white man, could have bought the house while I pretended to be the live-in housekeeper. I bet that happened more than once back in the day. But didn't women like me deserve to own a house, and a house that's surrounded by great amenities, and call it home even then? In 2010, after the housing bubble burst, my partner and I made an offer on this house, which we thought would be a long shot. But my partner and I had great credit and the ability to make a good down payment, thanks in large part to the accumulated wealth of his parents, which they were willing to share with us. Now, in hindsight, I have mixed emotions knowing how predatory lending prior to the housing crisis affected home buyers of color. Predatory lending to minority purchasers was rampant during that time, and it contributed to the bursting of the bubble, which made my house somewhat affordable. Only 7% of all homeowner-occupied houses were in Black neighborhoods, but those Black homeowners were twice as likely to face foreclosure as whites. So yes, I gained a dream home at a time when other people of color were losing theirs. And I wonder, did they really deserve to lose the houses that they called home? When I reflect on my good fortune, I consider how much the United States government was willing to support land and home ownership for white people versus my African American ancestors. So I think about the Homestead Act from time to time. During the years of the Homestead Act, which was initiated during the Civil War, some 1.6 million deeds were claimed by farmers who were willing to make the land productive. I know it was a hard road to hoe. It was a lot of work. But they got allotments of 160 acres. And over time, that led to a 10% shift of all public land to private homeowners, up until 1976 when the Homestead Act ended. So a Civil War era promise was also made to African American freed slaves. General Sherman's Field Order Number 15 promised a 400,000 acre strip of land to be given to freed slaves in increments of 40 acres. That's where 40 acres comes from. Now, this land swap order was revoked by President Andrew Johnson the following year. And that land remained with the former Confederates who had actually taken up arms against the United States. Freed slaves received nothing except the option to work on the plantations of the people who used to own them. Now, slaves proved they could work hard and improve the land, just like homesteaders. Why didn't they deserve to own land that they could call home? So when I have those homeowner moments of, I just don't feel like dealing with it, I think about my grandparents who were early integrationists in Washington, D.C.'s Rock Creek Park area. Now, knowing my granddad was a World War II vet, I assumed that he got to use the GI Bill in order to buy the house. But then I later learned that he, like many other Black vets from that time period, did not benefit from the GI Bill because the Federal Housing Association, which was the government agency that backed loans to white veterans so that banks could minimize their risk in case the veteran couldn't keep their house, they often did not do the same for Black vets. Now, I know that Black vets bled the same as white vets. Didn't they deserve to own a nice house and call it home as well? Back when our offer was accepted in 2010, I had a conversation with a well-to-do white friend of mine who lives up in Paradise Valley. Now, she sensed this foreboding that I couldn't pinpoint myself. And she kept asking me questions like, Kenja, what is your problem? And I'm like, I don't know if I can really afford a house. All the upkeep, all the costs, things like that. Well, she assured me that my competence and my partner's competence would keep us from falling into these catastrophic scenarios. But seeing that I wasn't assuaged, she gave me one of those stern, compassionate looks and said, Kenja, what is it really? I remember tears welling up in my eyes, and I said to her, I don't really feel like I deserve to own a nice house. When the title arrived for us to sign, a copy of the original deed came as part of that package, and it was placed on top. Now, I read this top page out loud because I was excited. I knew we had to sign a bunch of papers. I pulled it out, and this document on the very top said, ownership of said house shall never be transferred to a Negro. It said that in multiple multiple places, multiple times. Now, Orientals and Indians were also not allowed to own the house. They could live in it as housekeepers, but they couldn't own it. So this deed was from 1925. It's called a restrictive covenant, and it was common throughout the United States prior to the fair housing laws. I had never seen one before, and I said to my partner, when we go to the title office to sign the papers and they find out I'm Black, will they still let me keep the house? He says, Kenja, all that stuff is illegal now. You can totally own the house. All that stuff was outlawed 50 years ago. As a rule, are you sure? Maybe you should just go on your own. No. Come with us. We have to sign the documents together. So, I never really thought of myself as someone who is susceptible to internalized racism. But still, I wonder about my inability to accept that I deserve to own a nice house and to call it home. Thank you.
Kenja, what a powerful story. Whew. Owning your own home is so important. And it's so unfortunate that for a long time, people of color were denied this right. But the push for change of thought, heard in your words, felt resounding. You asked such important questions. Thank you for sharing. Our next storyteller is Ruchi Kalra. Kalra has traveled the globe, as you will hear in her story tonight. She has a Bachelor of Science in Math and Computer Science and an MBA in Marketing. Ruchi has her own business coaching firm, Dancing Raindrops, Inc., to help small businesses tell their stories authentically. When not helping clients, Ruchi spends her time writing. She is an Amazon best-selling author, having co-authored 4 books, and is now working on her own solo book. She is a contributor to AZ India Times newspaper, Brown Girl magazine, Thrive Global, Medium, and more. Her writing is a spicy yet soulful blend of Indian heritage, African upbringing, and American influences. She also has a passion for painting, cooking, and baking. She has been actively running a recipe group on Facebook since the start of COVID, which has turned into a micro community of support and escape for many. She is very active in her local community and is an advisor for the organization Help Humanity Today. She loved to travel and footprint the world before COVID with her family, which includes her husband, Vivek, her kids, Raya and Ishan, and her fur baby, Jax. And now, Ruchi Kalra.
Thank you, Nina, for the lovely introduction. I am so excited to be here tonight. So, what is home? Is it where we were born? Is it where we were raised? Is it where our parents live? Or is it where we live right now? Does the definition of home change over the years as we get older? One of the first get to know you questions that people ask is, where are you from? Now, I don't know if I should just give them a quick, vague answer or if I should give them my whole long life story. I don't know what they're looking for. So sometimes my answer changes depending on who I'm talking to. Sometimes I'll say India, as that is the country where I was born. That is the country where my extended family lives. And it's also the country of my first passport. Sometimes I'll say Zambia, a small country in Southern Africa that I moved to when I was 9 years old with my parents and my brother. And I still take my kids back every summer, and I've created so many childhood memories there. Sometimes I'll say Arizona, as that is where I live right now with my husband and my kids. But then there are times when people will say, well, where are you really from? Oh, okay. I was born in India. I grew up in Zambia, and I moved to the US to go to college. Oh, where and when in US? Oh, you want the long story. Okay, here it goes. I moved to the US in 1986 to a college in Kentucky. I was a young, scared, nervous 15-year-old who had traveled across the world to live in the dorms by myself with a promise to my dad that I would return when those 4 years were up. But somewhere between my sophomore and junior year, I realized I was enjoying this teenage freedom just a little too much. I could wake up whenever I wanted to. I could eat whenever I wanted to. I think I even gained the freshman 15 that everyone talks about. I wasn't ready to give up that freedom yet. So I convinced my dad, let me do my master's. And so I started my master's. And after that, I ended up getting a 4-year work visa here in Arizona. And by this time, my parents had made peace. This girl is not coming home. And they were right. This is where I felt I belonged. This is where I felt I wanted to be. The only time I felt differently is when I would fly back from an international trip and the immigration officer would say, "What is the purpose of your visit, ma'am?" That's right. I'm a visitor. I'm a foreigner. How did I forget that? And he would hand me back my passport and I would heave a sigh of relief and I would think, oh, that's it. Today is not the day I'm getting deported. My paperwork is in order. And he would give me my passport and I'd be on my way. Somewhere along those 4 years, I fell in love. And I not only fell in love with someone who was just as confused with the definitions of home, but he also, unfortunately, had his own set of visa issues. But we got married, we bought a house, we applied for a green card, and we started a family. And in 2001, we were both working in corporate America, and we had a 2-year-old, and we were waiting for our green cards. And one day, the lawyers called, and they said, "Ruchi, your work visa is about to expire, and we can't renew it anymore, and you need to go home. But Vivek can stay here because it's his company that's sponsoring him." I vaguely remember hearing Vivek and the lawyers talking about, is it going to be months? Is it going to be years? And they said, yeah, it's likely going to be years. And all I remember, I was still stuck on the first part where they said, go home. Go home. Go home to where? Go home to India, where my extended family lives, and I still feel a lot of love from them. But I haven't lived there since I was 9 years old. How would I adjust? Oh, do they mean go back to Zambia where my parents live, where my in-laws live, where I take the kids back every summer? But I have no legal status to live there. I was scared. They even said I could move across the border to Canada, and Vivek could live on the American side, and he could drive up on the weekends to see my daughter and I didn't know if this is what I wanted. We didn't want to break up our family, and I was scared. This is it. The day had come. I was going to get kicked out. But Vivek was convinced we will find a solution. But all I kept thinking was, he can't leave, and I can't stay. But we talked to a bunch of lawyers, we talked to a bunch of friends, and we found out the only way I could legally stay in this country was to get back on an international student visa. So I quickly applied for admissions and I started a second master's degree, and we continued on our journey of a green card. 3 years later, we had a 2-year-old, a 5-year-old, and we finally had a green card. And 5 years after that, which is the legal time you have to wait, we had our citizenship. And I clearly remember driving to downtown Phoenix to take our oath ceremony and thinking, wow, this means so much. This means that I have a voice. This means that for the first time in my life, I can vote in any country. But most importantly, it meant that I could let go of the fear of being kicked out of a country that I had called home for the last 23 years. Now, over the years, I have learned to count my blessings and know that I'm blessed to be able to juggle the definitions of home, and also to be able to incorporate the culture and the heritage of all 3 countries, not only for myself, but also for my kids. And now, when I come back into the United States and the immigration officer hands me my American passport and he says, "Welcome home, ma'am," I crack a big smile and I think in my head, heck yeah, finally. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruchi. What a timely story. Being a global citizen, your distinctions between heritage, nationality, and home were so clearly relayed. Your story is relatable to so many Americans. I've had those slightly awkward roadmap conversations a few times myself. Thank you for sharing. Our final storyteller of the evening is Harold Branch. Harold Branch III, affectionately known as HB, hails from the west side of Chicago. Defying all odds, he went on to become an applauded poet, speaker, and business trainer. HB's 25-plus year career accolades include his life story being featured on multiple media outlets, including an MTV documentary. His poetry and stage credentials include touring with global platinum music artists Woodstock 99, the Winter Olympics, and hundreds of schools and open mics. His youth and community work experience are prolific, touching the townships and police departments of Durban, South Africa, retreats in Canada, schools, hospitals, youth correctional facilities, universities, spiritual centers, and conferences all across the US. Considered a pioneer in the Arizona spoken word scene, HB was the founder and host of one of the country's largest open mic poetry and arts events, HomeBase Poetry, serving Arizona for over 10 years. This ASU graduate received the prestigious honor of being included in the Michigan Board of Education's 2016 list of 100 African American males you should know. His skills took him to Ghana under a month-long Fulbright Hayes Fellowship as an artistic cultural ambassador. But he is most proud that in 2016, Black Enterprise magazine featured Mr. Branch and his ex-wife concerning their accomplishments in co-parenting their highly gifted children, Harold IV and Ella Lene. Harold H.B. Branch, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Everyone, for me, as we wait for the video, there we go. Everyone, how you doing? So grateful to be here. My story is really about how hard it has been to find home, how difficult it has been to define where home really is. I mean, I have to be honest. I'm a nomad by nature. I'm a poet, a spoken word artist. I am the individual that travels and writes and recites and sleeps on people's couches, right? And do that. And that's my spirit. And that's been my spirit for a very long time. But not being able to find home, it actually started way before that. You see, if home is defined or given to us by our parents, I started off a little bit lacking. I was separated from my dad at 1. My mother passed away when I was 2. Thank God I had my granny, my aunt, my uncles, as well as my brother and sister to pick up that slack and raise me and give me all the love in the world and attempt to build a home for me. But I have to admit, I still always felt a little different, a little disconnected. I always felt a little weird. And it wasn't their fault. They did everything they possibly could. But for me, it almost felt like it was an obligation, like it was a favor, because I knew I wasn't their responsibility. And that was my foundation when it came to home. That was the challenge that I experienced. Now, once again, that wasn't their fault. It was my own mentality. Now, Chicago was rough. Chicago was very tough in the 80s and the 90s. And at one point, it got so tough that they decided I need to get as far away as possible. Thank God I had reconnected with my father by then, and he lived in Arizona, not just Arizona, but Avondale, Arizona. In the mid-90s, I moved to Arizona, and it was a different world. It was absolutely strange. The Southwest culture was something that took a lot of getting used to. I was in culture shock, but I gotta admit, Arizona welcomed me with open arms. They loved me. It was like every part of Arizona wanted me to be here. And so when people started to ask, where am I from? I had to say Chicago. That's where I was raised. That's where I was made. That's where my foundation was. I didn't leave till I was 16. And by then I lived 3 or 4 lifetimes in Chicago alone. But then I was in Arizona, and I have to claim Arizona because Arizona is where I got polished. Arizona is where I really learned how to translate all of my experiences into being a man and leaving childhood things behind. And even after that, I continued to move from Arizona to Chicago and back and forth. So even though I'm from Shy Zona, as I like to say, I gotta admit, I still feel a little disconnected in both places. Even though I feel comfortable, it's not 100% home. To no fault of either place, to no fault of any people involved. My own insecurities, I'm sure, fed and feed into that. So fast forward a little bit later, a bit later, I turned 40. And for anybody that's 40 years old, you know, turning 40 meant I was grown, like for real grown, not play grown, like straight up grown, like my knees hurt and I can't explain it, kind of grown, right? I'm paying taxes and understand them and still don't like it, kind of grown, like a for real grown. I cannot fake it and blame it on youth anymore. And when I looked at my age and peeped I was 40, it was a lot of things I had not accomplished yet, a lot of things I hadn't done, a lot of things that's been on my list that I said I would get to later, but it was later, and later was here. And something clicked in me and said, things I need to do right now. And it was at that time, another blessing showed up, and I was offered a Fulbright Hayes Fellowship to go to Ghana on a cultural experience, to do that with teachers from the Phoenix Union School District, as well as students from Arizona State University. Now, I was neither of those, but I was the artist, and they brought me in to do some work in the schools as we worked with teachers in Ghana to learn their teaching methods and to teach them ours. And I got a chance to put together the assembly for over 500 students. But while we were there, we got a chance to experience the motherland, to experience home. And it was something different when my feet touched the soil that my ancestors touched. It was something different when I got to go to the villages and meet the Hennies and the kings and the Batama Hennies and experience the priestesses and the spiritual aspect of my people. I've always been proud of my Blackness. I've always felt good about my African descent, but it was something else to live in it. Then it was to read it. Then it was to hear the stories of it. And I was there. I was there for the whole thing, the culture, the history of it. And I have to be honest, I didn't have all the effort that it took to be Black in America. Being a Black man here was effort, was energy. And that was energy I was able to save, because being Black in Ghana wasn't special. I didn't have to worry about so much that I worry here. It was like a weight lifted off my shoulders. And I even got a chance to go to the slave dungeons and the castles and experience the pain of our people. And it broke my heart, and it filled me with sadness. It filled me with anger, but it also filled me with an immense amount of grace for all of the descendants that went through it, that survived it. It gave me a level of understanding of my people that I did not have before, and a feeling of honor, of blessed. It was mind-blowing, family. I knew then I needed to live in Africa. I needed to be here often, to be recharged, to reconnect, but not all the time. I still miss the United States. I'm an American. I grew up here. It was a lot of things about the US I absolutely missed. And by then it was time to come back to the States. And as we flew back, it was an anxiety because it was another culture shift. I had changed in Africa. I changed there with the people. And I was coming back to a culture that was way more comfortable with confrontation, way more comfortable with aggression. And I started to trying to fight anxiety attacks in the airports. And finally, I got back to Arizona and I landed and we went through our process. And by the time I got around to where the families can greet us, I saw my kids. And I realized in that moment, as they held a sign that said, "You're gonna be happy to be back home." I knew then that I had traveled the US looking for a home. I even went to the motherland, and that felt like home too, but something was still missing. It wasn't until I looked at my kids and the smiles on their faces and the joy in their eyes for seeing their daddy that I knew they were my home. That was home. And honestly, no matter where we're located, that's the only home I need. There's no place like home. Thank you.
Thank you, HB. Ooh, I'm sure visiting the motherland has a way of putting things in perspective. I love most that you realize that home for you did not exist or take shape in the form of a single place, but in your children, your legacy. What a powerful realization. Whew, okay. Now it's time for the Q&A portion of the evening. Remember to submit your questions in the comment section just like you would when writing on a video post. While those questions are coming in, I'd like to take this time to ask the artists a few questions of my own. So the first one to all of you, as storytellers, do you feel speaking your story through the years has given you a more solid sense of yourself as your home? Oh, unmute.
Mute.
Ruchi, unmute.
Sorry. For me, I feel like it has, because it's been a constant, it's a reminder that for me, home has been a feeling. It's been more, I felt the love from my relatives in India. I felt the love from my parents in Zambia. And so I feel like it has, it's given me a reminder of that. That is where it's just grounded me.
I guess for me, I, like Ruchi, I still have this connection to my parents' home and my grandparents' homes as home. But being an owner of a home myself makes me recognize responsibility, recognize adulting, like HB said, well into that real adult life, and needing to be solid within myself as a responsible adult. So yes, carrying my own home with me like a hermit crab. Yeah.
Yeah, and same for me. Telling my story, and as it has evolved so much over the years, has caused me to grow more and more comfortable with myself. As I said in my story, my challenge wasn't that I didn't have a home per se. It was my own emotions and feelings around that, right? It was my own insecurities, if you will. So every time that I got a chance to tell my story, I felt more secure in me.
There you go. Yeah, I know it can be difficult because telling your story as a storyteller can sometimes feel performative. But I think it also does give us a greater sense of who we are each time we share a bit of ourselves. So yeah, I just wanted to ask. I have another question for all of you to answer. Whether it be a person, place, or thing, why do you believe it is important to have a place called home?
I think every living creature has to have a place to retreat to recharge, to rebuild. to de-stress, to sleep. So all of those things that go on during your waking hours have a chance to resolve and get you back to strength. And yeah, it's critical for every human being to have a safe place to call home, even if it is just within themselves, but ideally if it's a physical shelter, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. I have to agree with Kenja. As for me, it's like a security blanket. I know that no matter what, I can go home to the family. And sometimes it's not even just a physical place. It's just an emotional place, like she said. It's just, and I hope when, like now I have a senior in college and a freshman, well, they're back home now, but before they were home, I feel like even if tomorrow we move somewhere else, they will always feel like when they come see us, they're coming home. So for them, it would be physical. But for me, for the last 34 years of being here in the United States, my parents and my in-laws' home, my Zambia, is also home for me.
Mm-hmm. And, having access to multiple homes is a beautiful feeling, whether it be Chicago, Arizona, or the motherland, right? And for me, they're anchors, right? So we don't float away. This life could be difficult. This life could be challenging. This life could make you question yourself and who you are as a human being. And sometimes we need to be reminded of who we really are, what our roots are, what we believed long before we even started school. What our passions was long before we were influenced by that one relationship that one time, right? Or that one job that one time, you know what I mean? And so digging back into the people that knew you way back when we were at our rawest state, I think that helps us stay centered and stay grounded and help us find ourselves when we've had moments of floating away from who we actually are.
Agreed. It's funny. As you were saying that, I could hear my mom's voice in my ear, trash talking me during spades at like a family reunion or something. And it's like, yeah, sometimes you just need somebody who knows you as Simone and is not afraid to call you out and call you big head or any of that other stuff that happens when you leave home. Yes. So I have a question for Kenja, and it looks like it's a two-parter. So how did it feel reading those words on the deed of your house?
Yeah, so I thought it was like for real a conspiracy because I'm the conversation with my friend BJ, about deserving the ownership of a home and seeing those words on the title. Both of those things happen in pretty close succession to each other. And so I really thought, like, honest to goodness, Blake will tell you, my partner, that I really thought it was for real code. Like really somebody telling me, no, you cannot own this house. And then, sort of getting through the whole stack of papers and recognizing, because they didn't say what it was. It was just on top. They didn't say that every homeowner gets the original deed in the package. So, once I understood, it was marginally better. And I actually really didn't feel better until we got to the office and actually signed the papers. And I could ask the title officer about these covenants. And she's like, yeah, a lot of people have that weird reaction to them. But it definitely was disconcerting, but it really brought me to that place of understanding history is real. Of really getting the idea of how homeownership has played this role in how Black people can and cannot live successfully in the United States. So it really brought that home for me.
Yes. And I'm sure, the shock alone, just to see it in writing, we hear about it, we teach each other because it's not necessarily taught in schools, but to actually see it must have been jarring. The second part of the question, gratefulness, was the theme with which you opened your story. Now that you have lived in your home and have a place to call home, what are you most grateful for?
Oh, it hasn't changed. All that stuff I mentioned, all those historical factors, every single piece that led up to the circumstances of my life are a constant source of gratitude, going from my parents and my partner parents to our grandparents to the ancestors that I don't even know. I am really grateful for the people who fought fights that I would be too afraid to fight. So as mad as I might be at slave owners, I am grateful to the men who fought the Revolutionary War. As fearful as I would be of hoses and dog bites, I am so grateful to the young Black kids who were really willing to put themselves out there physically. I am grateful to the freedom riders, to all those young white college kids who went down in the 60s, risked their lives in order to give Black people the ability to vote in the South. Like it is for real. Like I really do think about all those circumstances and retain them as gratitude for my ability to move freely, sit in a coffee shop, have a cup of coffee, be free from the possibility of that so many women are in, of rape without recourse. Whether it was slave women or women in many societies today, like everything that has made it possible for us in the United States to have these valuable lives that we have, as imperfect as they are. I am always grateful for where I'm at and try to use that as a starting point to help us all move the next generation forward.
Woo, yes. And it's, you put it in such a succinct way, but it is such a massive concept to consistently go through and say you're grateful for all these things in history. And now, everything that's happening this summer, this year, this decade is going to be referenced in someone's, conversations in the future. So it's all very timely and very present. So, okay, here's one for Ruchi. What does owning a U.S. passport mean after the struggle to secure this country as a home for you and your family?
I think for me, owning a U.S. passport actually meant that I had a voice, honestly. Like I said, I've been in this country for 34 years, and I was involved socially, learned so much about the political system, and I truly felt like now I could vote. I can make a difference. And we have these conversations at home with my 21-year-old and 17-year-old. And I realized, like, finally, I have a voice. I can do something about it. I can be part of a change. And a few years ago, at a gas station in Scottsdale, I was coming back from an Indian party and I was wearing my Indian outfit and I was filling gas. And this man shouted from across the gas station, "If you're going to dress like that, you need to go back home." And I was shocked. And my kids were scared. They said, "Mom, get back in the car." My husband wasn't with us. And I said, "I can't get back to Chandler if I don't fill gas." And I actually just politely said back to him, "I am home." And that's all I said. And I continued filling my gas. I was scared. And then, so now I feel like I can be part of the change and I can say that I am home.
Yes. And I don't even want to touch on homie at the gas station, but I can only imagine just like the strength in saying and standing your ground in that moment and feeling it wholeheartedly. Like, this is your home. Like, dude, keep on driving. Knowing what you know now about the green card journey, what advice would you give your younger self?
Take up on one of the offers of a U.S. citizen and marry them. Just kidding. I honestly think it would be to let go of fear. I think I was so fearful the whole time that I was going to get kicked out that I forgot to kind of enjoy the journey part of that a little bit. And I think if I would just have told myself that it doesn't matter what would have happened, and it may not have been exactly what we had wanted, but it would have been our journey. And every one of those experiences honestly make us who we are today and tells our own individual story.
True, very true. I have a question here for HB. The concept of feeling like a visitor in spaces meant to be your home seems to be the genesis of your story. What was it about seeing your children at the airport that made you realize they are your home?
Man, it was when I saw them, to be honest with you, it was just a comfort. I didn't feel like I needed anything else. I literally had all I needed. And I think that's what home is, right? And we also have to recognize the duality of things. I could feel like a visitor and still feel like it's home, but not complete, not 100%, still have a weird feeling, even though beautiful memories and connections. But when I saw them, there was no duality. There was no alternating emotions with that. It was pure, this is all I need. I think probably because I was coming from an international space, and all I could think of is I had them, I could be anywhere on the planet, and we'll figure it out. We'll make it happen. We'll learn the language. We'll learn the people. We'll work to get a green card, right? We'll do the thing. But with them, that's the legacy. And I can't think of anything more important than the legacy. And I also think that it wraps right around to the beginning of the story, where I didn't get a chance to really be that. I didn't get to be a son, per se, like officially. To be that kid and look up at a parent. I literally never had that, right? Even though I had adults and beautiful spirits, I always had masculine and feminine energy there, and mother and father energy. But as far as those biologicals, I just didn't have that as a very young person. So to be able to get that experience, it was like closing a gap in my own childhood. It made me complete. They make me complete.
I can see how all of that could come full circle. I think as we're growing up, we have these ideas in our head of what your life is supposed to be, the roles you play, how that's supposed to look and feel. And if you don't get certain parts of that, you start to kind of like fight and try and search for it. And so I can only imagine the feeling of just kind of like completeness when you're like, oh, I'm the father. They're mine, That's great. Okay, so we have questions here. Have one from, ASU Cultural Affairs Executive VP, Colleen Jennings Roggensack. She is writing a question to Kenja. She says, I hear you, I see you, brava, insightful, a step to understanding. BLM, a human story wrapped up in our painful past and challenging presence. Well done. Are you now a lifetime storyteller?
I'll work on it, Colleen. Anything for you.
Yes. And question out. We have another one here from Michael Thompson. He says, homes are sanctuaries for us, as Kenja pointed out. What do you do to block out the world in your home to make sure it stays a sanctuary? And everyone can answer that one.
Keep negative people out. Keep negative people out. No negativity in my space. There's no beef here. You know what I mean? Like, this is definitely a sanctuary. It's my home, and I protect the energy. You nurture and protect. So everybody can't just come over. Everybody can't be here if they're known for having negative vibes or argumentative all the time or conflict oriented. Not here. I meet you at Denny's.
After COVID.
Post-COVID, right.
For us, I think it's more about, like, my kids are home since COVID, since March, and it's just trying to focus on the positive. Like HB said, is just focusing on the silver linings in everything that's happening in our life and trying not to complain so much. And I think sometimes when we focus on the positives, everything else just falls into place. And so just keeping the environment positive, not only just within us, and when you keep it around the home, then you keep it within you. So
right now we have this dog. We have this dog who is the bomb. And she just like takes care of every emotional problem, trauma we have going on. Just the cuteness and the sweetness of an animal. And growing up, we always had dogs for most of my life, and they really do contribute to creating a sanctuary. Just having somebody who's full of love and joy, and not bothered by who annoyed you most at work today. So that'll probably always be a part of whatever household I have.
Yes, there will always be something that happened at work.
Yeah, right.
Tries to follow you into your front door, especially if you're working from home. It just follows you from room to room. But I definitely understand the concept of just keeping your space positive and close the laptop. Just close it. Shut it off. Okay, we have another question here from Colleen Jennings Roggensack. Sorry, I apologize, Colleen. It is for HB. How does one puts down roots? As a military brat, everywhere is home and nowhere is home. Yet I am now an Arizonian.
Thank you for that question. What I would say first and foremost is to own it. We have to declare it first. We have to say, this is my home, and I am going to embrace all the parts of it. When someone complains about this place, then they're complaining about me and my home. When they compliment it, they're complimenting me and my home. Don't take the opportunities to detach, because they will exist, right? And I had to learn that early, because when I got reintroduced to my dad, I was reintroduced to all the branches. I had never met another branch, and they were welcoming, they were loving, but it was in my head, once again, outsider, I'm coming in, I'm late to the party, even in Arizona, and what I've learned, especially running my events, and people will complain about Arizona that's lived here for years and years. And I say we should give props and love to all of our native Arizonians. Thank you so much for creating a place for us to come to. You know what I mean? If we decided to be here, it's ours. So definitely own it all and just really declare it. And with that, enjoy not just what's promoted as Phoenix, but the Phoenix underground. There's been a culture here for over 100 years. This culture here has been here a really, really long time. Find it, discover it. Old Town Scottsdale as well as Old Town Avondale, right? Not just the new buildings. What about the old buildings? And talking to the people that's been here for decades, they're third, fourth generation Phoenix, of all colors, by the way. We have fourth generation Black people in Arizona too. Have those conversations, really embrace it, get off the campus, get out of these other spaces that'll help.
Agreed. Sometimes you got to push yourself and also dig. I feel like folks live in a place their whole lives and know nothing about it. I grew up in Georgia, and sometimes people say stuff to me and I'm like, wait, what? So I get it completely. You got to be adventurous. This question is for Ruchi from Sapinu. Ruchi, I'm a Delhi born, Congo raised, and moved here in my teens, and your story really spoke to me. Is it important to you that your children know Zambia and understand your attachment to it?
Yes, it is actually. And we go home every summer to visit the grandparents. And I think my kids are very connected with India, with Zambia. And my daughter and I were just talking about how this summer we couldn't go home, and we were thinking maybe we'd go home over Christmas, and we can't. And she said, I remember everything. Like, it's like, she's like, it just feels like home. Like I know each and every corner. She goes, I remember grandparents' home better than I remember our home from 3 or 4 years ago. And that's awesome, because I feel they're truly multicultural. And I think it's also the story that I said probably relates just like the person who asked a question about to all our third culture kids. We all grew up in a place where we're trying to make it home, yet hold on to our heritage and cultures and everything else. And I feel like we have the best of all the work, all of these worlds, and take whatever we want, the good from each one, and leave the negative stuff behind.
Very important. You guys are on it. I'm just soaking it all in. This is a great conversation. I have a question towards Kenja. There's this person's username is Traveling Snail. I think they heard your crab comment. They said, could I ask Kenja to repeat the Housing Act that allowed POC to live, own homes north of Van Buren? I'd like to share that info with young friends.
It would have been the Federal Housing Act the Equal Housing Act of 1964. So let me, I will send actual direct information to the questioner, if that's okay.
I believe so, yes. If you put it in our chat, I think that ASU is able to then send it to them. This is for all the storytellers. Marlene Rivas is asking, when you have family, friends that visit from out of town, what is an experience you share that connects them to your home?
Hiking and swimming. And probably the thing they recognize most is the sun. This heat. They recognize that first and foremost. But love to take them hiking. Just these outdoors are beautiful, and there's beautiful other places equally as beautiful, but no place more beautiful.
For me, I feel we recently had a cousin come from England and talking about underground HB. We went to Charles Has the Blues in downtown Phoenix, and my husband and I, Vivek, have been going there for years since college, and we just love it. And I just messaged her the other day and said, guess what? They're closing down. It's so sad. And so I feel like there is a lot of culture here, and we get lost in just the going out to Scottsdale, but there's so much other things to do. And I think for me, it's also just making them feel at home in my house with cooking. That's a big part of the Indian culture, is feed them. And so, yeah, feed them with love.
Is there something you regularly do with friends and family when they come to visit, Kenja?
Oh, I'm sorry?
Is there something you do with friends and family to kind of get them acclimated to your home whenever they come to visit you?
I take them to places around Arizona because there's some just history. There's fascinating history in Arizona and land and geography. I like to take people to the Pueblo Grande Museum down on Washington because that shows the early settlers and all of the canals that they built in the Phoenix metro area, and that early humans had built miles upon miles. They built canals all the way that brought water all the way up to Glendale, which meant that water was going up an incline. And so when people like to think of Arizona, especially Phoenix, as a contemporary city that doesn't have much history, I'm like, this is one of the parts of the United States where you can see thousands of years of history. And then, people who wonder why I've lived here for so long, that sort of helps explain, I'm like, I am here because there is neat, interesting history that's really available to you.
Yeah. I feel you. I'm in New York, so touristy stuff. And it kind of encompasses all the things that you guys have been saying. But I think the best is, like you said, it's like getting outdoors, taking people to some place that you really like to eat. I like actually walking the Brooklyn Bridge with people because it's super scenic. As long as you don't get run over by somebody on a bicycle. And then on the other side, it's like going and taking them to get like Van Leeuwen ice cream or something on the Lower East Side. So I definitely feel you guys kind of all together. And then, here we are.
While reading, I sent a link to Christine for the person who asked about the Fair Housing Act.
Yes.
So that it's a HUD housing and urban development website that has the history of fair housing laws. So that act was 1968, but it was an extension of the 1964 Civil Rights Act.
Okay. And I'm also seeing that we're able to reply to comments on YouTube and Facebook after, if you so choose, but I'm sure that Christine will forward that one on. And then we have a question here from Tracy Mason, ASU Cares GM. Harold, I love that you say your kids are your home. How will you teach them this feeling for themselves?
Oh man, I appreciate that. Teaching them, first of all, giving them just a strong foundation of love. I think that's step one. And letting them know that they're not confined to any locale, to any location. They could define themselves. So for me, it was them. I'm not quite sure what they'll consider home, but I know they'll always have somewhere to come back to. And they'll always have an anchor of love and affection and support. And they're gonna fall and they're gonna stumble and they're gonna get their heart broke and they're gonna make some bad choices and they're gonna do something stupid and they're gonna do great and they're going to be amazing. And in the midst of all these life ups and downs of disappointments and accomplishments, they will never be alone. So I think for me, the message is more about them never being alone in this journey. And they could define home for themselves. And even in not being alone, that may not mean me holding their hand next to them. It may just be them knowing I'm not disappointed in them or that I still believe in them. And they may not even want me to talk. They may just want me to listen, or they may just want daddy to make them something to eat, or I don't know. They may just want to crawl in bed and cry. Whatever it is, I'm here for it. I'm made for it and I'm built for it. And I'm eager and feel like it's the life purpose. So that will give them the foundation that they need to define home for themselves and to pass that on when they do decide, if they decide to have children.
Yes, this unconditional support. I think that resonates through everything. And it is something that we all tend to search for. And once you find it, it's like, ooh, okay, that's done. Let's keep it going. What's next? You feel like limitless. You have more possibilities. Harold, Ruchi, Kenja, thank you for sharing your stories with us this evening. I'm sure I speak for everyone when I say tonight's stories and discussion have given us much food for thought. We are in a very active time right now. Action commonly comes in reaction to an occurrence or a realization, but I feel we often forget the self-reflection that is at play as well. I hope tonight leads to honest self-reflection for us all, so we're able to move forward with more positive actions in the future. Thank you to the ASU Care staff for creating this space and to our virtual audience for their attention and candor. Be sure to join us next month for the 5th installment of Gather, which will take place on Wednesday, August 19th, 2020. The theme is Go Back and Get It. Be sure to like ASU Care on Facebook and stay tuned in for all of our upcoming programming. Have a great rest of your evening and good night. Stay safe, stay well.